Proliferation of gangs in the country is what we discuss tonight. Before I introduce the gentlemen that are with me in studio to help us unpack the same, I'll ask to pick this comprehensive package that was worked on by our very own, that is Paul Kiriobi, so that it can set the pace for the conversation and we also just get to understand where we stand as a nation.
Statistics released by the National Crime Research Center revealed that criminal gangs continue to surge in the country despite government intervention. The research firm has indicated that issues of insecurity remain a pressing challenge to national security, economic stability and social cohesion. A section of the gangs are widespread in different counties, terrorizing people and steal. The survey, which was conducted in 11 counties, has shown that out of the 309 criminal gangs, out of these 254 gang members is each present in one county. Among these gangs are Gaza, 42 Brothers, Wakali Wao, Panga Boys and Mungiki. In some counties, the gangs have survived over the past years, able to adapt and continue operating despite efforts to dismantle or suppress them. These counties are Mombasa, Kiambu, Busia, Nakuru, Garissa, Kilifi and Machakos. The research firm has acknowledged that measures put by the government to dismantle gangs have so far failed. One of the key reasons include inadequate resources for law enforcement, limited economic opportunities for the youth, and also there is a weak collaboration between law enforcement and local communities. Lenient bail and bond terms to the arrested suspected among the criminal gang members have also contributed to the existence of these gangs. 38.1% of the respondents say corruption within the criminal justice system has also made it difficult to deal with criminal gangs. To some extent, victims of gang crime end up withdrawing their cases in court. The research shows that the government has done what they could do best to combat existence of crime, but efforts have not yet bore fruits. These include intelligence gathering and surveillance operations, public sensitization, including chief barazas. The major factors that have highly contributed to these cases are pressure from peers already in gangs, vulnerabilities of poverty, and limited youth employment opportunities. Exposure to influence of illicit drugs and substance abuse and the desire for financial and other incentives has led to the increase of criminal gangs in the country. The research firm has now recommended the urgent need for change of tact that, among others, incorporate a multifaceted and evidence-based approach to combat criminal gang proliferation and resilience because the previous measures are not effective. Paul Kiriobi, TV47, Nairobi.
Before we pick the graphics that are going to reinforce that report by Paul Kiriobi, allow me to tell you the gentleman that I have in studio for the same. Byron Adera, security analyst, is seated right next to me. And next to Byron is Tom Ausa, the President, National Council of CBOs. Thank you so much, Senior, for creating time, as well as Peter Ouko, or Pete. It's actually Pete. Why did they say Peter? Anyway, Executive Director, Crime CPOA. And, gentlemen, what I hear, or what I have picked from the report is that, Kiriobi says that government says it has done all what it could do best to address the cases of the rise of gangs, but it looks like it is getting to a point where they can't manage it. And of course, we want to hear what the three of you have to say in relation to that, because ultimately we must find a solution, and the solution lies with us, or the solutions lie with us. Let us pick these reports so that they can help us understand the situation in the country some more. I know you could be privy to the reports, but it's important that also the viewer back at home is aware of the same. So let's have the graphics up. All right, this is basically a summary of what is happening in the country as to the rise in cases of gang or criminal gangs in the country. And so you see that we have gangs in 11 counties, 309 criminal gangs in 11 counties, 254 were each present in one county, that is present. 42 are each in two counties, and criminal gangs presence is at least a third of the counties. That we have Gaza family in 8 out of 11 counties, or about 72.7%. And then we also took of, 42 brothers. I've heard of them for the longest of time in 6 counties of 54.5%. That is what they. That is the percentage that they stand at. And then Wakaliwao in 5 counties. That is about 45.5%. We also have Panga Boys, or Chafu, or Squad Chafu, or Gang Chafu. That's what they call themselves. And then we have the infamous Mungiki, each in 4 counties, or 36.4%. And of course, this is according to the national. What is the source? You have removed that before I could check it. But anyway, the National Crime Research Center is the source of that. And we have now the number of criminal gangs. Mombasa 6, Kiambu 6, Busia 6, Nakuru has 5, Garissa has 5, Kisumu has 4, Kilifi has 4, Nairobi 3, Kwale 3, Bungoma 3, Machakos 3. Again, according to the National Crime Research, and perhaps there could be more, who knows. And then we also took of the factors that are contributing to crimes. The report says that there's pressure from peers already in gangs, 83.3 or 85.3%, that their vulnerabilities of poverty and limited youth employment opportunities standing at 84.3%. There's also exposure to and or influence of illicit drugs and substance abuse standing at 72.4%. I think some more on that desire for financial and other incentives or benefits stands at 70.2%, that broken or poor social and or family support systems are standing at 65.8%. We also have limited access to formal education and or vocational training standing at 44.0%, or just say 44%, and family or community influence standing at 30.4%. So why fighting criminals is becoming a challenge, that there is inadequate resources for law enforcement, 76.9% possibility of that there's limited economic opportunities for the youth, standing at 62.7%, weak collaboration, standing at 58.7%, lenient bail and bond terms at 49.4%, and political interference standing steady at 45.6%. Last but not least, we have again why fighting criminals is a challenge: inadequate community policing, that is 38.9%, limited access to formal education as well, that's standing at 38.3%, corruption within the criminal justice system standing at 38.1%, and withdrawal of cases by victims of gang crime standing at 37.7%. And last but not least, once again, we say difficulty in tracing criminal gangs. Gentlemen, we get to the conversation. First of all, gentlemen, we first of all ask this question, that the government says it has done more than enough or done what it could have done best. Do you want to trust that this is the situation? Maybe we start with you, Pete.
Thanks, Linda. I'm not privy to that information where the government has said they've done all they can.
More than enough, because the government can never say that.
Yeah, they can never say they've done all they can. Basically, the security of the nation rests in the hand of the government, the executive. If I just start with the objects of the, if we go to the Constitution,
right,
that establishes all this, the objects of national security, establishment of the Defense Council and all that, it puts that power squarely in the hands, not only of the executive, but of the Constitution.
Right.
So even the constitutional bodies like the Police Commission and the other factors within the security sector, they're answerable to the Constitution. And it gives them the mandate to do everything that it takes to secure life and property.
Right.
I don't believe the government, as I said, I'm not privy to that statement that they've done the much they can.
Right.
If I look at the statistics that have been given, I'll tell you for free that they're a bit old.
Okay.
We need to update them.
Okay.
Some of those gangs mentioned there long ceased to exist.
You know?
Some of the names have been regurgitated over time, and people still
Like
think
the 42
they exist.
brothers?
Yeah, like 42 brothers was in Dandora ages ago.
You think they're not in existence? Why would someone come up with this report?
I'm not
Perhaps
saying, I'm just saying that sometimes we need to update. I mean, when I look at Byron, he knows why I'm laughing and why we're laughing.
Okay.
Because these things mutate every day. In the entire, in the community, if you talk about 42 brothers, we know where they were based before and where they were
They're the
located.
same with Msumbiji?
Msumbiji was in Western.
Msumbiji is a different thing. Okay,
Angola
interesting.
Msumbiji was a Western thing. The finances were known, and they even assumed national authority, like Mungiki, for example.
Right.
But what I want to say is this. The duty principally lays with the government. But number two, the community also has a very big role to play. But they must work hand in hand. The biggest factor contributing to some of this insecurity we have is just lack of trust.
Okay.
You know, the community wants to give this information. They want to share it every given moment. Then when there's a small issue and the police have to react to it, the way they react to it makes also the community now feel, if we share this information with you, and we're just doing something like demonstrating, for example, I'm just using that, and then you come and beat us up, why should we trust you with anything again?
With anything,
So I think the cohesion between security agencies and the community needs not to be short-term.
Okay.
We need to know from the grassroots, I mean, from the time we are growing up, that it behoves all of us to ensure that we are secure in our communities. In Mathare, where we work, and where my brother knows where I'm talking about Mathare a lot, we've had 3 cases of people being knifed and killed. Well, I mean,
the last time we spoke actually was on that case.
Yeah, and I remember K24, I mean, you guys came and covered that story. Byron knows that story. One of the kids, I think, has been taken up by Hon Sonko.
Yes.
The people who killed these people are known. You know, they are known thugs, and they belong to gangs. Those gangs are not even mentioned in this list here. That's why I'm saying the list could have changed every other day. But then who protects these people? Because 3 months down the line, there's been no arrest. You know, so there's a conspiracy of silence. Sometimes you begin to wonder why people literally get away with some of these crimes. I want to say something about what I've heard on this, the brief.
And the story.
Yeah, on Saturday, I happened to be in a space, and there was a gang of about 150 children fighting. 75 or about
150 children.
150 teenagers. They're on
over what? Just fighting?
They're chasing each other. You are in our mtaa. You're in our zone. You're not supposed to be here.
Are you kidding me?
I was in the midst of it. Now, this is not a room I'm talking about. I was like, I thought these things ended ages ago. And what shocked me, they were all under 15 years of age. And I saw some pulling
knives.
Not knives. They had pipes. Nyahunyo on the pipes. And they were hitting others on the head and stuff. Now, my thinking was, if at 14, between 10 and 14, because that was the age, they're already doing that. That was in Eastlands. And it was around 5:36. People are in the streets. People are doing nothing. The parents are just watching. Like it's a normal thing. When we normalize that amongst our young generation, that's how they grow and graduate into the next. I could easily identify who the leaders were in that group. But they don't listen to you because they believe they can get away with it. Where have they modeled it from? That impunity, they must have modeled it from somewhere.
Well, interesting, and we come back to get to understand that some more and what then happened thereafter. But Senior, here we stand and we have a report that is quite disturbing. What is even worse is that, you know, as Pete says, that this could have grown to another level, perhaps a negative level for that matter. What do you make of this report and generally the situation of the rise in cases of gangs in the country? I would have imagined that, you know, we just deal with theft, you know, individuals and all that, but we are talking about gangs today.
Well, thank you for having me here. Number one, I've listened to my friend here, what he said. It's quite very true that most of the biggest challenge we have about these gangs are the police involving themselves fully. And trying to investigate the cases that happen in the slums. Every gang in this city or in any city has a leader. And the work of the leadership is to make sure, the leadership does not even appear where those things are done. He's somewhere having fun and trying to live his life out of the income that comes from the crimes done by these young people. His work is simple. Number one, to give them ideas where they can make money, because it's all about, it starts all about money first. It's about income. Then when the problem comes, this is the same person who goes to the police. There must be a police at the end of it who will be compromised in case there's an arrest before it goes to court, and then the case is taken round and round and round. Two, there's also some chiefs. You know, unlike other places, in informal settlements, the chief or assistant chief is a very key person. Also, those are the people that are the problem in this situation.
Okay.
When these young men fight over where are you in our territory, it simply means, you know, most of the activities they do apart from killing people and stealing from them is to do illegal connection of water. In fact, before that, they disconnect the pipe that takes water that the government puts or the county puts to supply water to people, so that they can get a chance of selling water to individuals to make money for the gang, for their group. Electricity, the same thing, and many other activities. So if you come to their area, it means you're coming to interfere with their income. So if personally, I don't live in slums, but CBOs that I live in the slums, and we have leadership. They know people, even they live with the leadership. Then another reason why it's difficult to fight these gangs is because of fear. If you go to report them at the police, and the police happens to be part of the beneficiary of this process, and then now this person who reported is in trouble. Because that leader has money that is collected by these young people.
Okay.
That money will be used, because the beneficiary, once that police is also a beneficiary, he comes back to tell this person.
Okay.
Then the life of the reporter, the person who reported, comes
in
danger.
Okay.
So that fear, if that is dealt with, Kenyans are willing to give information. And when the government doesn't have resources to fight these gangs, then that is a stupid thing to say.
Okay.
Because number one, a country without youth is no country. So you must deal with this problem to avoid all of our youth in the city or in the urban areas getting into that line, because the government has no jobs for them.
Okay.
We must have allocate enough resources to deal with this problem, because we have resources.
Okay. And I come back to you shortly,
Yes.
but you know, now that you know, police have to be mentioned on this, and in a huge way, they appear to be incriminated in the whole process. I am curious that you know, the police, it is in the best interest of the police to make sure that you know, there's peace, because then of course this is their job that we're talking about. Why is it that it appears as though they have been compromised? Why is it that it appears though they are beneficiaries? And I don't get to see just how much the police get to benefit from this. As a matter of fact, my memory, just jogging my memory back, I remember this gentleman called Katito. I'm sure you people have heard of him back then, who literally had to face it rough because of fighting the gangs, because of fighting criminals somewhere in Githurai, you know, to a point of actually being taken behind bars. Why would the police be at the heart of this, to be honest?
Well, Pete and Tom have painted a very gory situation right there around the whole matrix that brings together the criminal gangs, or the actors themselves, the police institution, and obviously the community that we all share in as a populace within what you define as Kenya. But without Pete's examples that are actually really practical, you would not imagine that you would have some of these things that would, to an extent, also dispute some of the shared statistics. But I rely on the statistics. So let's just base ourselves on statistics.
Yeah.
Because the statistics and the work of the police, and of course the part and the role that you play in the community, is very important to actually buttress and find a background to all this. And so the National Center for National Crime Research Center talks about, and I read through the report, and it puts the numbers between 2000 and is it 10, before the promulgation of the famous constitution, to about 33, which of course we dispute, because some of the criminal gangs that existed then, part of those are personally fought against, talk about the Subaltern Defense Forces. So the evolution and the picture that's painted by Pete, is such that if you do not address a small-time fire, then it grows into something that's really uncontrollable. Yeah. And so 33 is some very conservative number, perhaps because I also share in the same background, my cadet class intake 33.
Okay.
But they put the number to an evolution to 2017, because that's a very important timeline right there, to well over, I think it talks about well over 326 criminal gangs, an increase of more than 897%. That should worry you that within a governable space that is called Kenya, you have such an increase over duration of only 7 years. But there's factors to it to consider right here. And one of them is pretty much to bring it home. So Geneva Paper 2018, because you need the tools of trade to actually commit these things. So weaponry and the weapons are assessed to the same. So the proliferation of small arms and light weapons is a factor to also consider here, because some of those criminal activities actually been sponsored and actually been pushed through the muzzle of a gun. The Geneva Paper 2018 puts this, numbers, Linda, to about 650,000. So those are illicit weapons available for use within our borders.
You know?
That is crazy. Within the same year, and I was on TV, that is 2017, and a report came from the hothouse of good research that was done by a world body called World Internal Security and Police Index in conjunction with the Institute of Economics and Policy, because economic elements are actually very important to be considered here. And they polled 127 nations across the world. So it's a global body, no vested interests. And of course, they don't just particularly like Kenya. And they said our national police service was ranked third worst in the world. So further to buttress this point as to how then we are letting up, failing catastrophically in terms of addressing these criminal gangs, and with such rise in numbers, we have to put it right at the doorstep of our internal policing. And by this, not just the police alone, it's actually the community involved. But let's take it further in terms of the domains that are considered. One was our processes. So how do we recruit? How do we promote within? Then they talked about capacity. So capacity talks about the tools of trade that our National Police Service, as it is now after 2010 Constitution, as opposed to use to combat. So how is our intelligence? How is the wherewithal in terms of the legal infrastructure? Do we have enough laws, by the way? Or do we have any excess of the same, but we are actually not just applying ourselves to them? Then they consider another domain, which is legitimacy and outcomes. So we talk about outcomes here. And Tom has talked a bit, and of course Peter as well, in terms of, people get arrested and they get let up. They let go. People get picked up, and you know what? They're going to leak out some information that you've given. So what are the motives here? What are the incentives to the good people, the citizenry that are looking at that space saying, we can do something. But then if we actually let information of value into those systems, how are they going to treat it? How are they going to treat it with enough confidentiality? Or is this going to get back to adult steps? So there's a whole lot of things. But just to say, in terms of just that report, personally, I don't agree with a number of things. Maybe even just the names of, the evolution has taken time. Through the softening vista of years, names have changed. But I would want to also point ourselves to, well, one, within the criminal actors themselves, the social media space, the online space, is now becoming, because in the information age, is a lot more interesting than even those people are bearing.
And I would have assumed, because one of the questions that I have here is that, I mean, with the coming of tech, we would have assumed that it would have been easy to address these concerns, but why is it
Absolutely. So the online space, and by the way, that's a difficult one, because people have not grown into that, or rather the regimented systems that we are, and thankfully to the way we actually constituted as a national police service, and the armies are now, grappling with how much the information age has now overtaken generations over time. And we have an institution that's very slow to change, whose wheels grind far too slowly. Then you have the evolution of some of those things become more and more difficult to actually even pinpoint, investigate, and also to actually address. But then, a big one in terms of just the factors contributing to our lack of traction in fighting this, I would put politics and the political element of national power right at the center of it, and at the very top.
And we come to that.
That's cost about 54%.
And we come to that. But before we even get to come to that, Pete, you have been on the ground for the longest of time, and you talk about crime CPOA. You say it becomes very easy for you to address this if you're going to highlight the root causes, highlight the concerns that actually get these young ones to involve in such heinous activities. And Steve Ogutu is watching, and I like some of the questions that he sends to us, because then they speak to the many that I had, and I think I'll ask them. He says, ask your guest, cases of juvenile gangs attacking Kenyans daytime with machetes have become commonplace in areas like Mombasa. What are the push and pull factors to these kinds of emboldened criminal activity, despite police actions, which he acknowledges at least there is police action to a certain level? And what else is left to be done to address the concerns, noting actions already undertaken by security actors? First of all, why do they keep cropping up? Why are they still happening? And from what point do they happen? And why is it that despite all this action that we put, security action, we still are not getting anywhere?
Now, just as you rightfully mentioned, Crime Simple is a catalyst on crime prevention, legal empowerment, and social justice. We believe social justice economic factors that Byron is addressing basically go to address, either the cause or effect of crime.
Okay.
But the criminal gangs, it's such a wide space now. When you talk about criminal gangs, are we just addressing the machete issues? I'll come to that. Has it also mutated to tech, as Byron is saying, where we can use tech as a gang to raise resources to fund other criminal activities? Are we using tech, for example, for porn, the porn rings, where young people are being forced to commit sexual acts that are then sold to the dark web?
Right.
So the criminal gangs now, it's not just about the machete-wielding gangs you see there. You talk about Mombasa, for example, and I'll tell you one thing for free. The regional commander for police who's been taken to Mombasa, Ali Nuno, he's someone I've seen work in Thika. And Kiandutu slums was one of the worst slums in this country, crime-wise.
Yep.
You didn't dare go there during the daytime. And in Kiandutu, the community and the police decided to work together. The community even would give the police border borders. So they would go and, they had the reporting mechanisms, anonymous reporting mechanisms that would not expose the people who made the reports. And you can go to Kiandutu today and walk. But even though Kiandutu has gotten quieter now, and there's less criminal activity because of the direct involvement, the leadership also counts on who's leading the fight against these crimes. We had worse criminal gangs in Kisumu. Then there was a cop called Wanyama, I think he retired or something. And he just decided he had to get to the root of it. Now, you go to Mombasa, there's the issue of drugs. Who's selling these drugs? Those kids can't afford these drugs. Can't we address that factor of where they're getting these drugs? I was in Isiolo the other day, and one of the security people said, Isiolo is the center of Kenya. You guys might think you are on the other side, but everything comes in through Isiolo. Right now, we are seeing the highest arrests of heroin and cannabis and all drugs in the Isiolo Circle, Moyale, Marsabit corridor. Things that we assumed were coming from other areas. So I think one thing that Byron alluded to, which I want to go to the root of, from all our research and from all we've seen in what we do as Crime Simple, politics is at the center of all these criminal gangs, whether they're youth gangs, whether they're the gangs, because there are people who ultimately want to use them. And they don't want to be directly culpable. So they maintain that network to feed onto their political shenanigans.
And I'm curious, what are these shenanigans? To gain what, ultimately? Because now, you see, politics is about leadership.
The other day I'll tell you, there was something that happened in Mathare. Mathare, some parts of Mathare were literally closed down. You couldn't go there. Why? Because there were elections going on. And the aura that had been created was that the whole of Mathare was violent. But there are just a few young people who had gone somewhere and been told, do X, Y, Z. I think our politicians need to know that it's sickening to continue using young people for their political ends. These people, when they're arrested, they're individually culpable. And when they go to prison, the politicians don't come to bail them out. What we are telling them, guys, at the end of the day, you'll be alone. These guys will not come and save you.
What you talk about on the Kiandutu, example, for instance, is that this is a community that has said enough is enough. This is perhaps a community that has said we're not going to be used by politicians, neither are we going to allow for our children to be used by politicians. Maybe just to loop in Tom, who works with community, like pretty much close. How do some of these, activities actually get to affect the daily, running of a community, such that it could get to a point where, a community is just comfortable while this is actually going on, or they get to a point where they say enough is enough? And how does it make it difficult for CBOs and, persons like you that are always bringing goodness to communities, to function?
Thank you. We have about 72,000 registered groups countrywide that work under the National CPO Council, where I'm the president. One thing I don't want to forget before I answer you is that what my friend said here, it's just very simple. We have, we have other groups that are not mentioned here. They don't have names. Like now, for those ones who deal with the cattle listening. And those ones, the heads are politicians known by the system, known by of the biggest office in this country. Unless the people who are leading this country decides to fight the fights, then we'll get where we want to go. But when you are also threatened politically, we cannot get anywhere. Coming to what you said,
Right.
the effects of what is happening within our community, within our informal settlement, because of these gang groups and other criminal groups that don't have UN names. And I said they have heads. All criminal groups has a leader. When you say how do the police benefit, how does it benefit a politician? You know, when they started initially, maybe it was to protect a certain politician during elections. But then they realized they can continue with this and make money. So that politician is not in this game anymore, in some cases, but the leadership of that remained. Now they're making money from these groups and trying to change, to corrupt the system, not to fight it.
Right.
Anyway, it affects us like this. Number one, electricity that they connect illegally kills people. It makes some people who pay for electricity in the neighboring area to lack community, because these young people have directed the electricity to somewhere else. When you see lack of water to many places in Nairobi, for example, it is created most of the time because they want to block the water system, sell water to the needy people so they can make money for the groups. Many other things that they do using these gangs makes money at the end of it. What is the end result is the money they want. So kids stop going to school. They start using substances like bangi and cocaine, those who can afford them, and they don't know how they afford it, because some of them still do that. And many other activities, rape, and early pregnancies, and other activities that affect the community. Okay. So that directly affects the community and the parents the parents of these kids. And I think the best way to fight these fights is to get all of us involved, from the clergy, the parents, community, the entire community to get involved.
It's good that you bring us to that point,
Yes.
and it reminds me of the Nyumba Kumi initiative. It reminds me of the community, policing activities that we get to have. How functional are they, if we're going to talk about them today, maybe coming to you, Byron, but as well, just how lucrative is this whole affair of just being in a gang? Because even when you look at these individuals, they don't look, the way you would see someone is living a good life. It shows, but it doesn't look like it's that lucrative.
Well, to you and me, they may not look lucrative because our measurements of lucrativeness, so to speak,
different. Okay.
is different. The matrix is by
but there's a standard, the basic, ukiangalia mtu hivi,
what's that standard? Who takes the ownership of the standard by the way? I mean, for me and for someone else who sat around this table, our lucrativeness would be that we are satisfied by the things that we do. That for me, if I change a life or two, and I rescue a life or two and make them breathe easier, that to me is very lucrative living, so to speak.
And I say this, acknowledging that we have the things like wash that come across as lucrative,
Absolutely. So then gets me to that point.
Okay.
And so we are not lacking in some learnings that have been put together as well. Robert Merton between 1938 and 1957 talked about the strain and norm theory, and he talks about deviant behavior. So how much does crime pay? So he says deviant behavior actually happens when our conventional aspirations exceed the level of satisfaction that is associated with the legitimate behavior. So if those dominant aspirations that you and I are now sharing in and celebrating quite hugely within the borders of this country, I think the world is grappling with the same, is that you're driving a very big car, you have a big home, you look like you're splashing money, and people have taken selfies with loads and tons of money.
Photocopied.
Absolutely, photocopied, so the wash business. So that is seen by all and sundry, right? Okay. Everybody gets to see that and say, oh yeah, that's... And majority of those people who do that and live those flashy lifestyles, quite a number of them are associated with pursuits that are political in nature. And so people coalesce around those now accepted, which are anomalies, by the way, because functional societies need to actually celebrate meaningful stuff. You don't get celebrated for swallowing saliva. You get celebrated by doing something that's actually legitimate, one, and two, something that is propagating good and sustainable living. Then we're getting it wrong. And you asked about how our politicians or our leaders are gaining from that. But are they leaders? Actually, you could talk about them misleading, you know, from very different fronts. You can say it on both sides of the aisle, and you can point a finger at any politician you choose to look at and question how they actually got to those levels. And how they got to those levels, and Thomas talked about it, is them using the bulging numbers of our youths, because trust me, you won't see an octogenarian, an 80, 90-year-old guy taking part in those criminal gangs. Perhaps they're giving some wisdom from the background, I don't know. So it's the bulging youths that are unemployed that are being used and promised. So it's more like an illusion as well, that, you know, when I get to the center of power, it's going to be found by you guys, the boggers and the whatever. So when they get to lose out on getting to those seats of power, eventually, they are left high and dry. So where do they turn to? Because they still want to maintain those lifestyles. It's criminal activities. And so crime pays from that perspective to them. But most importantly, if you look at some other learnings as well, Johan Galtung in 1969 talks about the structural violence theory. And just the way our societies are constituted, they can cause us, or by preventing us to get to our basic needs, cause us to now get involved in crime. So you're talking the distribution of national resources, the sharing of that national cake, the systemic marginalization in some areas or another, and you have the bulging youth right at the center of those considerations, by the way. So if you are to consider all those things in a nutshell, you will put the political element of national power, because that is where the leadership of a society, that is where the coining of all the institutions that the country lives by is eventually, you know, discussed and of course penned and brought out to breathe for the benefit of the population.
And I would say that perhaps majority of us would not agree to what the report speaks of. Absolutely. But do we agree to some of the reasons they highlight that would be the main causes to us having these criminal gangs? Allow us to take a quick short break. Gentlemen, still so much feedback coming from you, and we appreciate that. We'll try as much to look into that as, of course, we continue with the broadcast after this break.